Have you ever walked into a room and instantly sensed the emotions hanging in the air like invisible threads you're somehow wired to pick up? That was my childhood. And honestly, I didn't have the words for it then. As an INFJ, the so-called introverted intuition was more than a personality quirk. It felt like a sixth sense. I remember sitting in class, noticing the barely there sighs, the silent glances, and just knowing when a friend was struggling before anyone else did. But there was conflict brewing. The world wanted quick answers, loud participation, and linear thinking. While my peers seemed to thrive in group projects, I'd get lost in my own internal monologue, searching for the meaning behind every task. Why can't I just be normal? I'd ask myself. The truth is, normal never fit. It wasn't until years later I heard the term INFJ and realized, wait, there's a language for how I see the world. So, let me set the scene. Imagine holding a tuning fork for emotions amplified, sometimes overwhelming, always whispering that you're dancing to a rhythm no one else can hear. That's where my journey began. Now you might be thinking, isn't being an INFJ just a personality thing? That's what I thought, too. But as I grew older, the differences became sharper, more insistent. Terms like sensory overload and executive dysfunction entered my vocabulary. Imagine attending a birthday party where every laugh, every flashing balloon, is a sudden thunderclap in your brain. This was my experience of overstimulation, a hallmark of neurodivergence. Setup. I tried masking, blending, fitting in. Conflict. The more I masked, the more exhausted I felt, physically and emotionally. Resolution. One day, reading about autism and ADHD, I saw myself reflected back for the first time. But you seem so organized, friends would say, unaware that my color-coded notes were a lifeline against chaos, not a sign of ease. Here's the kicker. Discovering neurodivergence didn't put me in a box. It unlocked the door to understanding why textures bug me, why routines are my anchor, why my mind's a web of parallel processing, not a straight line. Let me tell you a story. At my first job, colleagues praised my emotional intelligence. Psychology calls this high affective empathy. But behind the scenes, being so tuned in meant I was absorbing everyone's stress like an emotional sponge. Combine this with heightened sensory processing, a neurodivergent trait, and you've got a recipe for overwhelm. Picture trying to solve a complex puzzle, cognitive load, while the radio blares and the lights flicker. That's how social settings felt. Sometimes, I'd retreat to the bathroom just to breathe, asking myself, is something wrong with me? The conflict wasn't just external meeting others' needs while suppressing my own, but internal battling guilt for not always coping. Resolution came slowly. I started to see my sensitivity as a sort of superpower, one that needed boundaries. It wasn't about shutting down empathy, but learning how to turn down the volume when necessary. So, if you've ever wished you could care a little less, or process a little slower, trust me, you're not alone. Empathy and sensitivity are gifts. But like any gift, they need care and respect. Here's a question. How do you build relationships when your brain's wiring sets you apart? For years, I became a chameleon, adapting, mirroring, hiding my quirks behind what neuropsychologists call masking. Setup. I'd memorize social scripts and rehearse jokes just to ease my anxiety. Conflict. The real me felt miles away. I'd wonder, if they knew how much effort this took, would they still like me? Now, you might be thinking, isn't that exhausting? Absolutely. Masking is like running a marathon in a costume 3 sizes too small. The cognitive dissonance between my authentic self and my public persona led to burnout. Through trial, error, and a lot of vulnerability, I realized true connection happens when I risk a little more honesty. Letting someone in on my need for downtime, or my aversion to small talk, opened doors I never expected. The takeaway? Authenticity isn't always easy, especially for INFJs who crave harmony. But it's the only path to relationships that nourish rather than drain. That's a lesson I'm still learning, one conversation at a time. So, how do I thrive in a world that wasn't built for my brain's operating system? The answer isn't simple, but it's hopeful. Let's talk strategies and silver linings. First, I've embraced neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. Small routines, like a daily sensory check-in, help me notice when I'm heading toward overload. Tools like noise-canceling headphones or stimming objects aren't crutches, they're self-care. When it comes to work, I lean on my INFJ strengths, holistic thinking, and deep focus. But I've learned to communicate my needs clearly, challenging the myth that sensitivity equals weakness. Now, you might ask, what if people don't get it? Some won't, and that's okay. I've found my neurotribe online people whose brains work like mine, who celebrate different, not just tolerate it. If you're listening today, wondering if your wiring is a liability, here's my final thought. Uniqueness is a gift. With the right boundaries and some radical self-acceptance, you can turn sensitivity into strength and carve out a space where you truly belong. Take what resonates, leave the rest. This was INFJ blah blah. See ya.